Greetings, dear listeners. Today I will tell you a special story, quiet but deep, like the evening silence in the Wild West. This is the story of a woman who was rejected and left alone, and a man who heard her heart, even when she was silent. Close your eyes and be transported with me to where the sand sings in the wind, and bread smells of love and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss new heartfelt stories. And now, let's get started. The Arizona sky was slowly sinking into twilight, and a calm but harsh silence descended over the desolate plain. The last rays of the sun gently touched the dry hills, coloring them in shades of gold and crimson, as if nature was saying goodbye to the day, preparing for a cold night. The dust, raised by the wind, slowly sank to the ground, enveloping the lonely ranch, standing among the vast expanses as a mute witness to a life full of loneliness and unconquered will. James Cartwright, a young man in his early 30s, lived here, in this corner of the world, isolated from urban vanities and human eyes. His face reflected the severity of the trials he had lived through. After the death of his parents, he was left alone, but he did not break down. The work he put into the land and livestock was his silent prayer and a way to stay afloat. James didn't say much, he knew the value of a word and understood the power of silence. His gaze was steady and calm, but in the depths of his eyes there was sadness and a certain inner emptiness that could not be filled with anything but a sincere human connection. That evening, when dusk had already turned into thick darkness, cut only by the light of a single lamp by the door, a silhouette of a woman appeared on the road. She walked slowly, taking each step with difficulty, as if the whole journey was a test of her body and spirit. In her hand she held a cast iron frying pan, old but well maintained, and a small knapsack containing her only luggage. Her dress, wet from the rain and dew, clung to her body, and her hair, dark and thick, was braided into a long braid that swayed slightly in the wind. This woman, Leah, was the daughter of two worlds. A half-breed, half Navajo, half white, she felt like a stranger all her life. She was not accepted in her native tribe, but among whites she was considered different. She walked through the forest for 3 days, enduring the night cold and hunger, clutching in her heart the only thing she had left, her mother's recipe. This recipe was more than just a cooking instruction, it was her memory, her roots, her hope. There was love and care in his every word, which supported her through the most difficult hours. Leah didn't say much, her silence was deep and penetrating, as if she carried a whole world of unspoken thoughts and feelings. Her eyes, dark and slightly moist with fatigue, sparkled with inner strength and determination. In them, one could read the pain of exile, longing for a home that was lost somewhere in the past, and hope for a new life that she could not yet fully comprehend. James stared at her intently, making no sudden movements. A soft melody of sympathy sounded in his soul. He understood that this was not just a wanderer, but a person who had endured a lot. His heart responded to her quiet strength and pride. In these silent meetings of two lonely souls, something more was already emerging, a quiet recognition and respect that does not require words. When she reached the porch, Leah sank down on it, as if putting herself at the mercy of this new world, but her eyes still burned with perseverance and a desire to survive. A fire was already burning inside the house, warming the space, filling it with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread, those simple joys that meant much more in her world than one could imagine. James invited her to stay the night, asking no questions and showing no pity, but only quietly accepting her into his world, whatever it was. Leah, without saying a word, just nodded and went inside. This evening was the beginning of something new and important, gentle as the morning light and strong as the earth they both loved. In this silent moment of two strangers connected by fate in the past, a story about faith, hope and love was born, which does not need big words, but lives in simple actions and quiet mutual understanding. The Arizona morning enveloped everything with a gentle light, as if nature itself was awakening after a long night, filling the world with quiet hope and warmth. The sun, slowly rising above the horizon, cast its first rays, cutting through the cold veil of dawn. The wind barely rustled the leaves and grass, as if afraid to disturb the peace of this new day, which promised to be special. There was a small table on the old wooden veranda, on which lay a linen towel, slightly faded from time in the sun. Its simplicity was part of the comfort that Leah created with her own hands. She worked quietly, intently, and her every move was filled with meaning and concern. The water into which she dipped her hands was infused with fragrant herbs that she collected in the forest when she left the village. Her fingers touched the cold water, washing away the traces of fatigue and pain, but there was something more to this act, as if she was washing away the heaviness of the past, leaving room for a new beginning. The frying pan that Leah was carefully stroking was old and heavy, but in her hands it came to life, becoming a tool through which she expressed her soul. It was as if she was talking to her, conveying a piece of warmth and hope, as if she could understand and preserve everything that could not be said in words. In these simple cooking rituals, her strength was hidden, the strength of a woman who did not allow herself to break down, despite betrayal and loneliness. The smells that filled the air, freshly baked bread with a subtle cinnamon flavor, the light bitterness of roasted beans and the freshness of mint, created a sense of home. For Leia, home was not just a place, but a state of mind that she hoped to find here, among strangers and open spaces. James, coming out onto the veranda, felt that something about this morning was different from the others. His footsteps were quiet, but his heart was beating a little faster. Meeting Leia seemed to have awakened forgotten feelings in him. He sat down at the table, his gaze carefully following her every move, and in this silence there was more between them than could be expressed in words. He tasted the breakfast, and every bite felt tender and caring, woven into the recipe that Leia cherished as her most precious. It wasn't just food, but a story written in every ingredient, in every touch. His silence was a confession. He didn't need an explanation, because he could feel the depths of her soul through this simple breakfast. Leia talked about her mother, a woman whose songs and recipes were her guiding light in dark times. In these memories, there was love and warmth that supported her when everything around her seemed hostile. She also opened up about the pain associated with her father, who left when she was still a child, leaving a void in her heart that no one else could fill. This story was not about grief, but about strength, about how a person can keep light in his soul despite trials. And it was this force that James saw, a force that attracted and inspired. On this day, he did something that might have seemed simple. He handed Leia the key to the storeroom. But for both of them, it was a symbol of a new beginning, trust and acceptance. This key meant not just access to food and supplies, but an invitation to a world that James was willing to share with her. So, at the first breakfast together, the story of two lonely souls who found in each other hope, warmth and the opportunity to move forward together was born. In this quiet house on the edge of wild Arizona, a new chapter began, a story filled with respect, care and, perhaps, love, which does not require loud words, but lives in every look and touch. Evening descended on the ranch, plunging everything around into a soft penumbra. Silence filled the room, only the light crackle of logs in the fireplace interrupted it. The warmth of the fire seemed to protect from the gloomy rain that drummed on the roof, sheltering the world from the hustle and pain. Leia sat down in an armchair, tightly clutching an old straw doll, a rag-like, almost forgotten memory that had survived all the trials of her life with her. Her eyes were tired, but there was a faint spark of hope in them, hope that could only appear now, here, in the house of a strange man who seemed to understand her without words. She began her story quietly, as if afraid to break the fragile magic of the moment. Word by word, she opened her soul to James. She told him about her mother, a woman with a soft voice and a strong spirit, who baked bread to the songs of the wind and the songs of the forest. These songs, like magic threads, connected generations and destinies. Leia recalled how, as a child, she stood next to her mother, learning to touch the dough with love and respect, as she treasured ancient recipes and secrets. For her, this bread was more than food, it was a connection to her roots, to what made her herself. But the world turned out to be a cruel one. Her half-Navajo, half-white blood aroused suspicion and alienation. In the tribe, she was considered a stranger, and the white people did not accept her as their own. Leia has become an outcast, an advocate for traditions that are both native and alien to her. Her attempts to preserve the memory of her mother turned into betrayal in the eyes of some, when she baked bread with white flour, for which she was rejected by the tribe. The tears she was holding back ran down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady and calm. She didn't complain, she just talked about how she left home one day without looking back. How she slept under the stars at night, basking only with what she could find in the forest, how she learned to hear the music of nature, which became her comfort and support. James listened attentively, understanding and compassion lit up in his eyes. When Leia stopped talking, he talked about his own pain, how he lost his parents at an early age, leaving the ranch, which became his only world. He told how silence became a protection and a way for him to survive, how words often seemed meaningless when alone. He explained that he didn't talk much, not out of indifference, but because he was used to expressing feelings through actions, through caring for the land, animals, and people he cared about. He confessed that when he saw Leia at the door, he felt a kinship of souls, a pain that could not be hidden, and a desire to give warmth and peace. That evening, two lonely hearts found in each other a reflection of their wounds and hopes. They realized that together they could stop being exiles, that their past should not determine the future. Their silence was filled with mutual understanding and a quiet love that was beginning to awaken between them. The fire in the fireplace warmed their bodies, and the conversation warmed their souls. This evening marked the beginning of a new path, the path of healing, trust and, perhaps, true happiness, which comes not with big words, but with simple, sincere moments nearby. Time seemed to slow down at the ranch, and every new day brought not just business, but small miracles. Waking up to the chirping of birds in the warm sun, Leah felt the fresh air fill her lungs, and the house was filled with a new life, a life that she herself began to create. Every morning, James went out onto the veranda, where the heat was already smoldering in the oven. Leah prepared breakfast with ease and tenderness, as if she were performing an ancient ritual. She gently washed her hands in a basin of water, adding a few sprigs of fragrant mint to cleanse and soothe her body. Her every gesture was like a quiet word. The kitchen spoke, the dough spoke, the aroma of fresh bread spoke. James stood next to her, watching her with quiet respect. He was still silent, but there was a growing connection in those silent moments, something more than words. His gaze softened when he saw how Leah took care of the little things, carefully smoothing the dough, watching the fire so that it would not burn, and putting a slice of butter on the still warm bread. The days were full of simple but meaningful actions. James taught Leah the basics of working with tools, how to hammer nails into old boards, how to tighten ropes to strengthen a fence. Leah deftly picked up the hammer, although sometimes her hands trembled, not from fear, but from inexperience. James smiled, softly and rarely, but it warmed her more than any words. In turn, Leah shared with him the wisdom of herbs and teas. She picked mint at the edge of the garden, choosing the most fragrant leaves, and talked about each plant, how it helps the body and soul. Together they brewed tea, and the room was filled with light smoke and a subtle spicy scent of sage. For the first time, James felt that his home was not just a place to sleep, but a space where he could breathe deeply. The vegetable garden became their common brainchild. Each seed Leah planted seemed like a small hope that gradually sprouted and grew stronger. James watched her with quiet admiration, seeing how she gently touched each leaf, how carefully she watered the earth, as if reviving it with her own hands. Meanwhile, the town started talking about the new owner of the ranch. Rumors were flying around the streets, intertwined with admiration and curiosity. Mrs. Bennett, an elderly widow with lifelong wrinkles, was the first to visit the house. After tasting Leah's pie, she couldn't hold back her tears. These tears were like silent forgiveness, memories of maternal affection in childhood that seemed forgotten. Gradually, more and more people began to come to the veranda to enjoy fresh bread with honey and cinnamon, an aroma that reminded them of family, warmth and tranquility. The neighbors whispered that these pies contained not just flour and sugar, but Leah's soul, her love and memory. James watched the changes in the house and in himself. The former emptiness gave way to the light that spread through the rooms, warming every corner space. He felt his heart gradually thawing, as a place appeared in it for another person, for Leah, for a new life. On one of those evenings, when the sunset painted the sky in delicate shades of pink and gold, James quietly asked if she would stay forever. Leah looked at the fire in the fireplace, then at him. Determination and calmness shone in her eyes, and her answer was full of quiet strength. She won't walk away from those who keep her warm, even in silence. Because sometimes love is just a presence that doesn't require words. And at that moment, under the flickering of the fire and the whisper of the wind outside the window, their stories full of pain, hopes and expectations intertwined, opening a new chapter full of tenderness and understanding. Spring at the ranch brought with it not only warmth, but also a long-awaited awakening of the soul. Every dawn became a new page in their lives, where every day was filled with quiet but strong hope. James was building a summer kitchen. It was not just a building, but a symbol of a new beginning. His hands, accustomed to hard work, now worked gently and carefully with wood, as if every touch filled the space with love and care. He carefully adjusted the boards so that they lay flat, and the canopy provided the necessary shade during the hot afternoon hours. Meanwhile, Leah found the strength to create beauty from the simple. The wooden door became a canvas for her soul. Slowly and with trepidation, she applied patterns, each of which carried a deep meaning. These ancient symbols reminded her of her home, her tribe, her mother, and who she was. Each curl reflected a story of pain, loneliness, but also of the strength she had learned along the way. James watched her, feeling the warmth and sincerity in her gaze flare up in him more and more. Their days began to resemble a dance, quiet, but full of synchronicity. He taught her the crafts of the ranch, she taught the art of making herbal teas and pies. They did everything together. They watered the garden, picked the first fruits, and learned to understand each other not with words, but with looks and gestures. Leah talked about each plant, its healing properties, and the tribal legends that were stored in these simple flowers and herbs. James listened, amazed by the depth of her knowledge and the calm confidence with which she accepted life. When the sun went down and the night gently enveloped the earth, they gathered around the hearth. The flame was reflected in their eyes, and in that silence, an unspoken intimacy was born. For the first time, James felt that a house was not walls or things, but a person nearby, whose voice and breath became familiar, whose presence gave strength and hope. He looked at Leah, and a feeling was born in his heart that he had never recognized before: tenderness, respect, and a desire to protect. Leah, who had been hiding her pain and fear for a long time, was now allowing herself to open up. Her silence was filled with the music of inner freedom, the melody of trust that he had managed to hear. She was no longer afraid to be herself, to show vulnerability and accept the love that had quietly entered her life. And so they sat together, two people from different worlds, now connected by a common home and warmth that cannot be expressed in words. They had cups of fragrant tea in their hands, and around them was a world where there was a place for hope, understanding and true happiness. There was gratitude in their eyes for this quiet world that they had built together, step by step, day by day. Thank you, dear friends, for spending this time with us, immersed in the story of how two souls found each other in silence and mutual understanding. Let this story remind each of us, sometimes the strongest feelings are born without words, in the simple warmth of a glance, in caring for another, in the ability to listen to the heart. If this story has touched you, please leave a like, it will help more people to hear it. Share your thoughts, emotions, or memories in the comments. It's important for us to know how you felt. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss new heartfelt stories that will warm your soul and give you hope. See you soon, friends. May there always be warmth in each of your homes, not only the fire in the stove, but also the warmth of hearts.